Okay, we're live, Adam.
Awesome. Thank you, Du. Good morning, everybody. Today is August 11th, 2022, and I'd like to call our meeting to order. Today is the special meeting agenda for the Ad Hoc Advisory Committee for the Rainbow Municipal Water District and Fallbrook Public Utility District's reorganizations proposals. Today, I'm your moderator, Adam Wilson, and I would like to move on to item 2, which is the roll call by Administrative Assistant Erica. Erica, if you could call the roll.
Okay. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Brian Albright. Jack Beebe.
Here.
Keith Greer. Absent. Gary Croucher.
I'm here.
Nick Kinettis.
Here.
Tom Kennedy.
I'm here.
Sandy Curl.
Here.
Lydia Romero.
Here.
Nick Serrano.
Here. Hi, everybody.
Morning. And Kimberly Thorner.
Here.
Okay, so we have 9 members present, 1 absent. There is a quorum.
Erica, thank you so much. And committee members, thank you for being here today for your participation. That moves us on to item number 3, which is the agenda review by the moderator. Today's agenda is pretty straightforward. There are no changes from my end to amend the agenda. We will then move on to item number 4, which is today's public comment. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to provide comments on a non-agenda topic germane to the advisory committee. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Secretary Erica, can you inform us if there have been any comment slips submitted by the public this morning?
I have not received any comments, and so far I have not received any emails either.
Thank you. That will conclude that item, and we can move on to our business items today, which are under subsection 5. 5A is the approval of action minutes for our last ad hoc committee meeting, April 11th, 2022. The advisory committee will review draft minutes prepared by the commission clerk for the April 11th, 2022 ad hoc advisory committee meeting. The draft minutes are in action format and recommended for your approval. I will make one notation based on some communication that I've had with committee member Brian Albright, as the draft minutes indicate that he suggested a working group be established to assist with the recommendations. Going back through the video and through just personal memory of both him and myself, I would like to make a suggested amendment that it was Executive Officer Keen Simons that noted that it would be appropriate and best to form a working group so that would provide added value to LAFCO and its process. So with that amendment, I would entertain a motion and a second.
So moved, Kennedy.
Second.
We have a motion by Tom Kennedy, a second by Sandy Curl. Erica, will you please do a roll call?
Okay. Brian Albright.
Aye.
Jack Beebe.
Yeah.
Gary Croucher.
Yes.
Nick Kinettis.
Yes.
Tom Kennedy.
Yes.
Sandy Curl.
Yes.
Lydia Romero. Lydia there? Nick Serrano.
Yes.
Kimberly Thorner.
Yes. Aye.
Lydia. Is that a yes?
It looks like she's having connectivity issues.
Yeah, it looked like an
Okay.
I with a connectivity issue, but that was like a very
Okay.
roundabout I.
Okay. We're going to have including Lydia, 9 yeses, so the motion passes.
Thank you, Erica. That will move us on to business item 5B. This is the working group's presentation to this committee on rate impacts. Just a very brief overview. You'll recall back in April, this committee agreed to form a 4-member working group to study or essentially drill down a little deeper to potential rate impacts should Rainbow or Fallbrook detach. It was identified that the 3 agencies that should be looked at were the City of San Diego, City of Poway, and Valley Center. And this was done to provide additional context if there were to be any potential rate impacts. And so without further ado, I'd like to pass the baton over to Kimberly Thorner, who was gracious enough to help us lead in this effort. And I know she has a PowerPoint presentation to present to all of us. So I will kick it over to Kimberly. And Kimberly, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. I am going to attempt to share my screen. It worked.
Real quick, I passed the presentation over to Du, so maybe it's easier for him to do that and you could just cue him.
We did can you see it right now, the presentation?
Perfect.
Okay, all right, perfect. There we go. All right, thank you for that introduction. And I am pleased to produce the findings of the work group for the full committee. I know we had a letter from the Water Authority yesterday, and I understand there'll be a letter forthcoming from Rainbow. I think it's a good thing when you produce findings that have thought-provoking conversations. So I'm not going to address the letter received yesterday. I got to be honest, have not had a chance to go through it, but maybe we can do that at the end of the presentation. So just to kind of let the full committee know the process that we went through as the work group. The first thing we did is we talked about initial discussions of what information we needed in order to take a look at and answer the questions. We then reviewed the work that had been done by LAFCO staff to date on the topic of the cost impacts. And then we decided we needed a presentation, more detail from the Water Authority on how they set their rates, how cost allocations happen. And that happened with the full work group, and we did record it. So I think we had one work group member that had to take a look at it later on. Then we prepared a white paper, and I did take the lead on that white paper, reviewed it with Moderator Wilson, and then we did make edits and revisions from the work group members to the white paper, and I believe that was incorporated into your packet. And I have been nominated to make the presentation today due to the fact that I can speak water to a certain degree. So also as a reminder, what we were tasked with and what we attempted to answer are what are the cost impacts to Poway Valley Center and City of San Diego of detachment based on the Hanneman report. And then the second question, which has been raised numerous times through this committee, is do detachment and roll-off have the same impacts? And then last but not least, if you're determining cost impacts, are there any offsets to those cost impacts that should be considered? The first thing that we decided that we needed to do was to come up with some reasonable assumptions, because no one has a crystal ball as to exactly what's going to happen with water sales. You can't predict what each customer, what each water agency is going to take. So the first reasonable assumption in order to move forward, and it has to be very general, is that there'll be no increase in water sales by the remaining water agencies after a de-annexation to offset any lost revenue. And we thought that this was a reasonable assumption based on recent very flat and or decreasing water sales, and also the fact that all water agencies are going to be faced with implementing new conservation measures. We have the 55 GPCD coming, even proposals to make it go lower, and we're all calling for conservation right now. So saying that water sales would remain relatively flat, we thought was a reasonable assumption. The second assumption is that we had to assume that rates would be allocated in the same manner that they currently are by the Water Authority. It is impossible to predict how future boards are going to allocate rates, and the Water Authority Board recently voted to postpone any changes in that formula, or any consideration of it, until at least 2024. We did have one subcommittee member note that the Water Authority would likely change their rates if there were a detachment. That also is a reasonable assumption, but we noted that a future board has rate autonomy to decide what that is, and the Water Authority does have an obligation to sustain its future financial viability. So we didn't venture to guess what a future board might do, but we did want to note that that is a possibility. The third and final assumption that we used is that, and this is what we were tasked with based on the Hanneman report. So we utilized the Hanneman report as the basis for the numbers and the costs. So one of the things that came out of our presentation from the Water Authority, and what we specifically asked for, is the best predictor of future cost allocations is to look at past rolling averages from each of the member agencies. And each member agency of the Water Authority has a different mix of fixed versus variable rates. And we also have different customer bases. Some of us are heavy agricultural, some are heavy municipal and industrial. That is not going to change overnight instantly for any agency. So we thought the best thing to look at was the past rolling averages and the past contributions by member agencies. The Water Authority's fixed costs vary in allocation time periods. Some of the fixed charges take a look at a 5-year rolling average is 7 or 10. We thought that a 5-year time period would take into account both high and low water demand years, in essence, both rainy and dry years. So this is a chart actually that was given to us from the County Water Authority. And what it looks at is the contributed asset share of each of the member agencies. And they were kind enough to break it down for us. In the first chart, it looks at 1 year. What was the last year percentage contribution to the Water Authority? Then it also looked at 5-year, 10-year, and lifetime. And if you look at Poway as an example that I highlighted, you see it's 74,690,419. Their 1-year percent contribution is 2.3, their 5-year 2.2, their 10-year 2.2, and their lifetime 2.1. And so you see kind of a consistency and not much of a variation between their 5-year or their lifetime percent contribution. You look at San Diego, their 5-year is about 37.2%, even though their last 1 year was 35.9, and Valley Center 4.2. So the thought here is that if none of these agencies significantly roll off of the Water Authority in the near future, their cost allocation percentages from the Water Authority for the next 5 years should be somewhat similar to their contribution and percentages over the last 5 years, as you don't see much of a variation of significance in these numbers, which of course then begged to the second question of the roll-off and detachment, which we will get to later. I apologize, I'm jumping around. So the next thing we looked at was the Hanneman report. And the Hanneman report stated that the purpose of imposing a financial obligation because of detachment is financial protection for the remaining agencies in the short run. And this is a chart from the Hanneman report, and it essentially said in the short run, a change of net revenue of 12.58 million would happen if there were no exit fee and both Fallbrook and Rainbow detached. So if you were to take those 5-year percentages that we identified earlier for the 3 agencies, and you took that fair share percentage of those net revenue, what did he call them? I'm going to make sure I do it right. A change in annual net revenue of the Water Authority, The result would be Poway would it see an increase of 276,000 approximately per year in the short term. San Diego, 4.65 million, and Valley Center, about 528,000 as their share of the annual increase. Again, these are based on those reasonable assumptions in the beginning and the 5-year rolling average. No one can predict the exact volume any agency will purchase in any given year. We were asked to look at what the rate impacts for the retail ratepayers at each of these agencies would be. That was something we did not delve into. Each of the member agencies does its own cost of service study, and they do it based on their customer base. Some are heavy agricultural, some commercial, residential, and they have a different percentage of meter sizes and also different cost tiers. By way of example, Valley Center actually has a flat rate. And so if you take these costs, you would actually have to go and ask each of these member agencies how they themselves would allocate their cost impacts to their ratepayers. So we did not venture to guess. The second question, are the impacts of detachment and roll off the same? And City of San Diego and many other member agencies, I think there's at least 7, are going to be rolling off in the near future with development of local supplies. And the question was asked whether detachment and roll off are the same and do they have the same impacts? And the short answer, there is no obligation for any member agency to take any amount of supply from Water Authority. We don't have take or pay contracts. But an agency that remains a member agency of the Water Authority will still have to pay fixed costs to the Water Authority, even if they don't take a drop of water. So the elephant in the room is not if detachment and roll off the same, because they are not. They're very different in that an agency that rolls off is still a member agency, and they have to contribute to future cost increases and rates set by the Water Authority Board. A detachment, once it's complete, means a member agency is no longer a member agency of the Water Authority and will not be contributing to future costs, obviously, unless an exit fee is conditioned. What we believe the true elephant in the room is, and Dr. Hanneman talked about this in his report, and Chair Croucher has actually brought it up before, is if the member agencies fully develop all of their local supply projects, it's a problem, and that they may have more fixed take or pay supplies than they'll have demands from the Water Authority. And if you remember in his presentation to us, and I took this from Dr. Hanneman's presentation to this committee, he said that the financial exposure to reduction in water sales, that there is one, and that he said for every 1,000 acre feet less that the Water Authority delivers to its member agencies, its net revenue falls by $1 million. He also calculated that there are about 60,000 acre feet in local supply projects that member agencies were set to develop by 2030. And that 60,000 acre feet by $1 million comes out to a reduction in Water Authority net revenue by $60 million. And by way of comparison, the Water Authority's fiscal year 22 net water sales revenue is $108 million currently. So it's a little bit more than half of the net revenue of the Water Authority. And obviously, this isn't a sustainable future. The Water Authority has an obligation to make itself financially secure. And we did not think that this was really a topic that this committee should take up, nor should it be in the detachment, but that it would be a better topic to include in the upcoming Water Authority MSR. The MSRs of agencies look at financial sustainability every time we all go through them, and that should be deferred. And obviously, an MSR review of the Water Authority also should include an MSR review of MET and its operations and agreements in the region. So last but not least, the question was, are there any offsets to the costs, the cost increases? Are there an offset from the ESP North County pump station that was never built? Fallbrook and Rainbow, we've heard them assert there's a cost saving to the remaining member agencies if they detach, because the ESP North County Pump Station does not need to be built if they detach. Water Authority asserted, I believe in writing, there is no cost savings as the ESP is not in their current budget. I think that both of those statements are true. The Water Authority did have this project in its 10-11 budget, and it was deferred, and bond documents do mention it in 2008. And so this is one where I think we need more information before this question can be answered, because we don't know if future rates, past rates were set in order to incorporate for the payment of this North County pump station. And so I believe the Water Authority probably needs to provide more information to answer this question. We didn't have enough at our hand. So that is essentially it. And with that, Adam, I would be happy to turn this back over to you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Really appreciate the succinct presentation to the group. Before I open it up for discussion, I just perhaps maybe give an opportunity for the other working group members to perhaps add anything that they may feel is of merit. And if not, then we can move forward to, as I said, an open forum to discuss. So I know that Keith Greer mentioned he would not be with us today. So I don't know if Brian or Lydia have any more to add. And I see Brian has popped up his hand. So Brian, why don't you take
thanks, Adam. I have nothing to add, but I did just want to publicly thank Kimberly for taking the lead and carrying the load on making that presentation. Very well done.
Thanks, Brian. And don't see Lydia here or have her hand raised, so she may have connectivity issues, but nonetheless, let's open this up for discussion to the ad hoc committee members. And perhaps Sandy, maybe do you want to take the lead here as a courtesy as ladies first or something? I don't see any hands up, so I'm just gonna volunteer you out of the gate if that's okay and appropriate.
Thank you, Adam, and I appreciate that. And Kim, and to all the committee members, I really appreciate the work that you did. And our comments are in no way to just to deny the work that was done. It's just, I think we have a little bit different perspective and want to share that. I want to talk about where we absolutely agree. And that is on the fact that the board of directors has full rate autonomy that is within their jurisdiction, and nothing that any action by LAFCO is going to change that. And additionally, that detachment and roll-off are clearly not the same things. And I appreciate how you've articulated that, Kim, and I think that puts that issue to bed. I do want to note that our water sales aren't flat or decreasing due to pending state water use efficiency targets. It doesn't line up with the fact that our region is efficient already, and we note that many of our member agencies are already below the long-term standards that have been set by the state. And so that we don't expect a large drop in demand, and we haven't rebounded since the last drought of 2012 through 2016. So we don't see huge margins for drops. This is really all documented in our urban water management plan that we've included. I'd also point out that our long-term demand increase after Pure Water Phase 2 comes online, increasing during 2035 through 2045 to account for Sandag's planned growth. And again, that is within our urban water management plan. So just a couple other things, again, thanking the work committee, the committee for the work that they did, kind of putting these issues out there. Just a couple of things I'd like to put a finer point on. And that is, really, we think the losses by the member agencies listed in the report are underestimated. Dr. Hanneman's net impact number is based on 8,108 acre feet a year combined water to Rainbow and Fallbrook for the agencies. However, I would like to point out that in fiscal year 21, they used 26,000 acre feet. And in 22, they used about 24,000 acre feet. And that his detachment fee, if one were to be implemented, really only includes the cost of the QSA water and not all of the costs of the water authority that are fixed, including desal, as well as our debt for the investment in supply reliability. So that specifically, I want to indicate then just to also underline the planning documents do not measure up with some of the conclusions of the group. And so certainly would be open to and having further conversation. I'd say lastly, with regard to the implementation of the CIP project to benefit Fallbrook and Rainbow, unequivocally, it has not been put in the rates. Kim is correct. It was mentioned in the documents. It was deferred. There was realignment of CIP projects. So I want to be very clear that no funding for the construction and operation of that facility has been included in our rates or budget. We can provide more documentation to that, but I think we've gone through this a number of times. It's also documented within our initial response to LAFCO back in September of 2020. So with that, I appreciate the opportunity to comment. Again, appreciate the work of the work group. Nobody needs more work. All of us have been here a very long time. There's been lots of documentation. You just need to go to the LAFCO website to see all of the massive amount of documents that have been presented. But this is also indicative of how critical and how complex this issue is. I have appreciated everybody's time involved in this, and I wish it could have been easier and shorter, but it is very complicated. I think we find ourselves in a very unique position right now. Metropolitan announced this week that they would be going into cutbacks, allocations at the first of the year based on their supply availability. Things continue to get more and more stressed within the state of California on water supplies. And so this is really a challenging conversation at this point in time. So with that, I conclude. Adam, thanks for the opportunity.
Sandy, thank you so much for your comments. Really appreciated. Perhaps give the other two subject agencies the opportunity to comment or question. So Tom, I see your hand up. So why don't you go next?
Thanks, Adam. And I also like to thank the working group for their efforts on this. We don't have any serious challenges with the information provided. One thing I want to touch on is related to the question of the impacts, the financial impacts post should a detachment be approved, and that's an appropriate thing to look at. And you know, for a lot of time we've been focusing, and Dr. Hanneman, on what the revenue impacts of the Water Authority would be. $10 to $12 million was his estimation. But with regard to the ESP pump stations, and just for clarification, the ESP North County ESP pump stations projects includes 3 different pump stations. One that's being built for the Surf Valley Center, and then with them a connection to UEMA, and then 2 additional pump stations, one for Rainbow and one for Fallbrook. These pump stations will be located to take water off Metropolitan's pipelines and deliver the water to us. They are the last official communication I had with the Water Authority on these prior to detachment was in 2017 when we were talking about it. It's still it hasn't even gone into design. So those are pump stations that have been included in our rates and charges since the late 90s. And so when we look at if we detach from the Water Authority, there will be a net revenue loss to the Water Authority from that. But there will be a savings. If we stay in, that money, which is estimated to be about $35 million, will need to be paid. And it is included in the CIP planning documents in this current budget. It's not something that was from a long time ago. I think it's page 148. If anybody wants to look up the Water Authority's 22-23 or 21-22, no, it's fiscal 22-23 budget. And so this is something that, like all the other projects on there, the Water Authority has put in there that it does inform agencies, when you have capital projects that are in your capital planning, that some of your rates and charges are to build reserves to pay for those, but it's not specifically appropriated until the fiscal year it's spent. And Sandy's right, it hasn't been appropriated in this fiscal year, which is correct. And we agree with that it's inappropriate to spend money on it right now until we sort all this out. And so I think that it's not a hypothetical that it's going to be a savings to the water authority in the future and all the other member agencies, because if we detach, that they save 35 million. If we stay, they need to pay it. If they don't build those stations, there's going to be an interesting Prop 26 question coming from those of us in the North County. So that's one thing. And I think another aspect of this to think about future ongoing costs of the water authority is O&M costs. Now, Water Authority has on several occasions indicated there's zero O&M savings from this. And that's in, I believe, in that September 2020 document that Sandy referenced, which is difficult for us to understand because we see their trucks in our area and they lubricate valves and do things in our area. But then if you say, if there's no O&M savings, what are the money that we're spending on O&M go to? And how are those expenses handled? And then, you know, if there's no savings, there's 240, 50, I don't know exactly how many employees down there. And if we're 6%, that's 15 people. You know, they indicated they wouldn't save any headcount. And so it kind of indicates the fact that a lot of our service comes from facilities not owned by the Water Authority, and there is some savings there. It's not zero. If it is zero, then it highlights that, hey, you know, maybe it's better that we're not in the Water Authority because they're not actually providing a service other than invoicing us for the water. Especially when you consider that the ESP, which is where a lot of investment is, still hasn't been provided fully to our service areas. So those are some of the comments that I wanted to make and make sure that this group and as well as LAFCO staff can make sure to take into account as we move forward, hopefully toward a staff report on this to the commission. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Jack, your hand's up next. If
Yeah, thank you, Adam. Yeah, and I want to thank the work group. It seems Kim tends to get all the difficult assignments in this, and I agree with the approach. Generally, I think the approach they took, I agree. You can only know certain things into the future. So the way they've done it and the information we have at this point is what it is. We don't all necessarily agree with all the conclusions, but that is, the information we're using. The one thing that I don't think has been put to bed yet is we've never said roll-off and detachment are the same, right? But what we've said is the financial impact is similar as well as the water supply impact, right? So the important thing is in the assumptions you made, you said, hey, the rates are going to stay the same, right? And I think that's a good assumption. There's no certainty that the rates will be changed. The reason everyone sort of assumes, well, the rates have to change is the reason you laid out in the report, right? Of saying, hey, look, we've got these supply commitments. If these agencies roll off, right? So, City of San Diego's got $5 billion plus in water infrastructure that they're building, right? That's capital cost. They got the operating costs. They can't then pay the same amount to the Water Authority, right? So the agencies that are left have to take up more of that cost. And so I think that's, the important thing that you have in the memo is that the detachment of Fallbrook and Rainbow from a revenue side is about $10 to $12 million. The impact financially to the Water Authority of the other agencies rolling off is $60 million. They are not going to pick that back up. Even though they stay as members, their contribution doesn't stay the same. And if you look at it on sort of a meter equivalent basis, per month, per meter equivalent to the City of San Diego, it's about 40 cents, right? The detachment cost. So if you take that number you had per meter equivalent, it's about 40 cents a month. If you take the roll-off impact to Rainbow on a meter equivalent basis, if we stay, it's about $13 a month, right? So there is a financial impact that's larger from the detachment or from the roll-off than there is from the detachment. And now if you say, all right, well, LAFCO needs to come in and set some sort of fee because they've got to offset the rate impact, that then sets this precedence for things going forward in terms of as people develop projects, they need to make the water authority whole? And the answer to that is there are things the water authority can do, right? So the big issue facing the water authority isn't the fact that the city's rolling off. That's been known for decades. The 20,000 acre feet that they're going to lose from Fallbrook and Rainbow isn't the big issue of detachment. The big issue in the region is that when we came up with these plans, we expected sales in the region to be about 900,000 acre feet, right? And they're about 500,000. And I agree with the working group that you're going to see some decline in this drought. Yeah, we haven't recovered from the last drought, but there's still a lot of grass. There's still a lot of outdoor irrigation, especially if you look in Fallbrook and Rainbow. There's still a lot of ag demands in Fallbrook and Rainbow. So our demands are dropping because those ag suppliers are, struggling with the cost of water. And so the important thing is, with all that, what can the water authority do? Well, one of the things that can be done, and it was a requirement that the city of San Diego added to improvement of the long-range financing plan, is look at right-sizing their supply mix, right? And that number is about $160 million a year in premium for the IID transfer and desal water. And there are potential partners that would be interested in those projects. And so that cost can offset both the roll-off and detachment risk. And it wouldn't take 10 years, right? That's something that, if that conversation started when we started talking about detachment, there is no need to serve that 20,000 acre feet to Fallbrook and Rainbow anymore. When we detach, the water authority holds no obligations to us. When you roll off, they still hold obligations. So that's why if you roll off, you still pay something because you still would get ESP service. You still would get, if you lost local supply, you would still be going to the water authority. Or if we detach, they have no obligations. So there's 20,000 acre feet of water there that they say, hey, we had planned for this, that they don't need. There's opportunities there. And so I think that's, the other part of this that, maybe fits within the work group, just to identify, that possibility, and the possibility within Met or Met service area. The smart thing the water authority did when they secured those supplies is those are set up as really water purchase type agreements, right? Desal is a water purchase agreement. The IID transfer is a contract agreement, but it's moved through Met. And so there are opportunities there, with Met or Met member agencies to offset this cost in a shorter time run. So appreciate it. But I appreciate the effort of the work group on this project.
Jack, thank you. Tom, you had your hand up, you took it down. Did Jack make your comment for you, or?
Yeah, I think the point about if you detach, is different than roll off. When you roll off, you keep your connections, and if you need to roll back on, you can. And that's always the roll on, roll off. I know the water authority has correctly brought this up at Met with the city of Los Angeles, who rolls on and off all the time, depending on hydrology. And so that becomes a challenge on how rates are set, and whether you set rates so that people who roll off and then come on when their plant's down or their local supply goes down pay more because they're not paying all the rest of the time, how your fixed and variable charges go. The water authority has and I've been on the board there for 7.5 years now, and it's a challenge. It's a big challenge, both politically and economically, to figure it out. But I think that the way the working group summarized it highlights the range of challenges of the water authority, and that the detachment challenge is a small one compared to the bigger picture, or the elephant, as it were.
Thanks, Tom. So, okay, some very good feedback and some comments from the subject agencies, and perhaps it's a good opportunity now to open it up to the full ad hoc committee and the remaining members if there are any questions or comments, concerns, or what may be pertaining to Kimberly and the working group's presentation today. So Nick, looks like you have your hand up. Nick Serrano, that is. Sorry, we have two Nicks here.
Oh yeah, I forgot. His name is my name too. I first off, I want to echo the comments about the appreciation for the work group and their work on this. I think Jack said it right. For whatever reason, Ms. Thorner tends to get all of these hard assignments, and I think, but most of all, I appreciate that when Ms. Thorner takes up an assignment, she understands the assignment. So I appreciate that she brought forward with the work group, just very thoughtful comments that I think provided some, certainly the reasonable assumptions, in my opinion, and certainly answers to the questions that we have here at the City of San Diego, largely the contemplation of detachment roll-off, and I've appreciated the larger discussion here today. I did have a couple of questions because, you know, it's been brought up in this conversation, and I've seen the letter from the Water Authority, the financial impacts, and I'm curious if there's either a way or how we plan to sort of rectify what is sort of more of the ballpark numbers that we're going to be talking about to member agencies. And maybe that's just based off the assumptions that were made in the work group report, or if that's something that I don't want to suggest that we need to consider it more broadly, but I would just ask that to the group about how we can rectify those numbers.
I can offer. We utilize the Hanneman report as the basis for the numbers because this committee vetted it. I think the Water Authority wrote a letter that said the Hanneman report is almost like a year old now, right? And so those numbers are old and that they should be trued up based on what's happened over the year. Adam and I actually discussed that briefly, and I thought we said we were going to use the Hanneman report, and that's what we did. But it's a simple kind of, we all know what ENR is, we all know what CPI is. It would be a simple calculation that LAFCO staff could do to maybe true up those numbers to today's dollars whenever they do take it to the commission. So that was my initial thought on that.
Yeah, understood. And Sandy, does that lines up? Okay. The other question I had was about the North County pump station and that contemplation. I would ask the Water Authority, given that we service other agencies in North County, should detachment occur, is there still going to be a need for the pump station, or if Fallbrook and Rainbow detach, there's no need for it any further?
With it, and I think Tom did a good job of laying out that there's 3 pump stations. One's going forward because it's needed for Valley Center and Uema. The other 2 are strictly for Fallbrook and Rainbow, and if they leave, are absolutely unusable assets. I would also make the point of, in addition to it not being in the rates and charges and being talked about as a future savings, it's about 2-3 years worth of lost revenue from those agencies leaving. So the lost revenue is long-term, and those pump stations are a short-term. But again, I have to underscore that they're not in the rates and charges.
Understood. Okay. Well, again, those were the 2 questions that I had. You know, Adam, I know that there's a spot for potentially more comments and committee members and stuff like that. So I don't know if I see that there's other hands, but again, I just want to express my appreciation to Kim and the work group for putting this forward, providing us with some answers here at the city. And again, just appreciate the work.
Nick, thank you so much. Yeah, and if you have more questions or comments, please don't hesitate. But regardless, Jack, looks like you have your hand up, and maybe provide some context or clarity.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're sort of all clear on something, because I agree the current rates and charges do not include the cost to build the ESP pump station, but neither do the current rates and charges include the impact of Fallbrook and Rainbow detaching. What we're looking at is what happens in the future if Fallbrook and Rainbow detach. So the revenue goes down to the Water Authority because we're not buying that water anymore, but then they also save that cost. They never have to build that ESP pump station. I agree with Sandy, that's a forever cost. So it's a one-time savings of 35 million. It's an annual ongoing cost of our lost revenue, but I'm struggling to understand how we just sort of pretend that saving that money doesn't matter. I mean, that's the one I'm really, you know, if we're going to ignore it, then at least someone's got to come up with an explanation of why that savings, that money is not real money, and why it doesn't matter, because it's real money. It's facilities that have to get built and are going to be funded by the other members that are still there.
Tom?
Yeah, I just want to, I know there was a discussion earlier, I think Sandy said it, about some of the investments and projects the Water Authority's built. And I know that in the report, the working group did touch on that no member agency has any obligation by any amount of water. That's not just a casual statement by Kim and the team there. This is something that the Water Authority, every time they issue debt, it's a very specific finding in a resolution that the Water Authority makes as recently as earlier this year, and the most recent one, that no member agency has to buy any amount of water, nor does any member agency have any obligation to pay any specific portion of the debt. I remember during the desal discussions, when the desal plant was done, even back to the point when there was the 9 agencies prior to the Water Authority taking back over, which Kim will remember those tortured times about 15 years ago, that there was a big discussion on, does anybody have an obligation to take any particular amount of water? Only 2 do, Vallecillos and Carlsbad, who opted in to do so. No other member agency has any obligation to take any specific amount of that. And so some of these continuing obligation discussions are, while interesting, they are contrary to the Water Authority's specific board adopted policy, that the Water Authority says you don't owe any particular amount of this stuff, nor do you have any amount of debt. So in a situation, let's say that tomorrow I make a deal with some water bank up in the Central Valley. Bad timing for that right now, I realize. But let's say it wasn't the same hydrology. And I contract with them to buy all my water and wheel it through Metropolitan to my connections, never touch the Water Authority's pipeline system. My purchase from the Water Authority go to 0. So over 3 years and then 5 years for this for the supply reliability charge, my fixed charges go to 0, my variable charge is 0. The only charge left is the infrastructure access charge, which is a couple $100,000 a year for us. And so the same with anybody else who, in a roll-off situation, if Pure Water could satisfy all of the city's demands under the rate structure now, their costs to go over 5 years would to the Water Authority would go down to just their infrastructure access charge. And so that's the system. Now, could the Water Authority change that structure? Yes. Should they? Perhaps. I've been on the board for a long time. I've been watching the Water Authority for almost 25 years. The challenge to increase fixed charges on agencies has been fought with pretty stiff opposition all the way along. It was supposed to start next year, but that got pushed off to no earlier than 2025, with rates adopted sometime in 2020, no earlier than 2024. And the real crux of the matter is that the big fish in the room, which being the city of San Diego, a lot of the cost drops on them, right? And I think that I agree with some positions the city has made in letters they've sent into the Water Authority, that rather than just, shuffling the chairs around on the deck here, we should look about how to manage the costs more than how to just shuffle the costs around. So I think that's an important consideration for LAFCO to say. And then finally, and this is something that I know Keene and LAFCO staff are aware of, there is case law related to detachments and LAFCO's ability to impose these sorts of detachments. It's all the way to the appellate court. Allen Valley East Kern case had a very similar situation where there was a detachment, there's a principal act related to it, and LAFCO set some conditions that were inconsistent with what the principal act said. And it went all the way to the appellate court. Appellate court says, no, if there's a principal act, you need to follow the principal act on that. And so the exit fee as being contemplated here is inconsistent in some of our opinions with that. But what I know that LAFCO's general counsel, and I'm not asking Alex to weigh in on this right now, so I'm not asking for any of that. I know they're looking at that, and I want to encourage LAFCO as they come to produce any staff report that there's a full analysis of that and consideration, so that we can at least understand LAFCO's position related to that particular bit of case law that's pretty specific to what we're talking about here today. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Any other remaining committee members have any interest to provide any questions or comments? Gary Croucher, looks like you're next.
There you go. Well, I appreciate it. I think a couple things too with the desal plant, when it says that there's no requirement for people to purchase water, but I think it's important, and as much as other people don't want to look at history, I think it's important that 9 agencies actually signed contracts, and then they asked the Water Authority to step up and take it over because it could be better financed. So there were contracts in place with 9 agencies. And I think that's important to realize, that the Water Authority stepped up regionally. And I think that's what the Water Authority is all about, is region. And as we move forward with this possible detachment, it really gets away from that. It starts to get away from some of LAFCO's primary deals where they try to not have overlapping different things and with governance and the rest. So I think as much as some of the folks are trying to say it's very simple, and it's not. It's very complex, and it goes to all kinds of different impacts, including groundwater basins that are within the county and everything else. So not from an emotional side of things, but from a business side of things, I think we need to continue to work together and look at the different options. I do agree with Tom in regards to looking at the rates and how they're configured. And I think Hanneman brought that up, and I think MWD is going to have to address that as well. So either way, like I said, not trying to stir it up more, but just trying to make sure that we're all looking at the big picture.
Thanks, Gary. Sandy, do you have more to add?
Yeah, it took me a minute to find it, and I just want to say in our submittal to LAFCO, and if you go to footnote 65, page 61, we acknowledge that the not building the pump stations is a savings that will be recouped within 2.5 years. So to say that we've ignored it is not accurate. So I would just point back to that. And
Thanks, Andy. And just for point of clarification, what correspondence were you relating to?
it's back to our original submittal in September of 2020. And again, it's footnote 65, page 61.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other members? Having seen none, I guess that more or less concludes our discussion. Before moving on, perhaps it's best we check with Erica, our secretary, to make sure if there's any members of the public that have submitted any pre-comments prior to the meeting or during our live deliberation.
I did not receive any comments before the meeting, and so far I have not received any live email comments.
Thank you. And perhaps maybe Alex, maybe if I could ask you, this item was essentially informational in terms of providing a presentation to the group. Would it be most or best appropriate to at least entertain a motion to have the committee at least acknowledge that they received the report and make it more of a formality, or are we good with just it being informational?
Yeah, I think this is a receive and file item, so no action is necessary.
Perfect. Thank you. That would conclude our item for business item 5B, which moves us on to item 5C, which is the future schedule. And I'll just kind of take the lead on this real quick and just give a very, very general overview of where we stand today. At this point in time, we remain committed to bring the proposals and applications to the LAFCO Commission by the end of this year, whether that be the November or December hearing. I know there was previous interest from Keene and his staff and interest from some of the advisory committees under his umbrella, both being the city and the special districts, that they would like the opportunity to review the material to date, and also before being provided any sort of formal proposal to the LAFCO Commission. So that is still in play, and I would anticipate that perhaps happening next month in September. With that said, I will have to circle up with Keene after his vacation and get more of an update on where he is with preparing his staff report. But I would then anticipate that this ad hoc committee convening one last time and once more before a November or December LAFCO hearing, so that this committee can wrap up their work and provide some sort of conclusionary finding or comments or recommendations to the full LAFCO Commission. So in the end, with the full focus still having our target, having this to LAFCO by the end of the year. So Nick, see you have a question?
Just to be clear, so you're anticipating, so we will have one more meeting of this work group, at which point it will be on us to either provide a formal recommendation or something to that effect to the actual commission, with the commission therein considering October, potentially November.
Correct. That's where we stand today.
Okay.
Adam, just one point of clarification. Is the recommendation going to go to the Keen, the executive officer, or is it going to go to the commission? Because I believe it's going to Keen.
It will go to the executive officer, and then Keen will include that into the administrative record and his staff report, and then that package in its entirety would go to the LAFCO commission.
And the only other thing that I would just offer, Adam, is again, just with that process, I appreciate you laying that out. The city of San Diego will be having its internal discussions with regard to everything that we've received so far, with we're looking to figure out how we will decide to weigh in.
Gotcha. And more than happy to work with you to kind of work through your timelines and hopefully coordinate all that information accordingly with our process as well.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments related to the schedule? Okay, that concludes item 5C. We'll move on to 5D, and this is just a quick opportunity for any remaining items or requests or comments by committee members to provide this committee with any discussion. Tom?
I just want to again express my gratitude for people like Brian and Lydia and the other folks who spent time on here, who I know it's been hard and it's been long and it's a twisted tale, but I appreciate you guys hanging in there and participating. I don't know if I could do it if I wasn't directly involved.
And you thought this might be the last one, but we got another one, it sounds like. So we'll see you again.
Okay, that concludes item 5D. And again, I will echo what Tom said and many other of the committee members. Thank you, Kimberly Thorner, for taking the lead on the working group. Thank for the working group members participating in that. And thank you for your time and deliberations today. And I promised you in an hour, and it's 11 a.m. So that adjourns our meeting for today. And thank you, everybody, and have a great upcoming weekend.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Adam.
Thanks, everyone.